So what I'd like to do now is take about 20 minutes of questions, because I know people always have questions about these matters. So let's take some questions. And I think it's a little better for recording purposes if you'll go to the mic over here, ma'am. Would you go over to the mic right there, and I'll be glad to take your question. Is this what you want, Skip? Is this how you'd like me to proceed? Send people to the mic, or do you want to walk around with the mic? Or,
This is fine.
Okay. All right. Very good.
I applaud you on what you were talking about earlier and the future generations. I'm doing genealogy right now on my parents' side of the family, and I run against stone walls, okay, trying to find who the parents were and what have you. But I can't even comprehend future generations down the road. If things continue the way it is, they're not going to be able to find out who the mother was or who the father was if there's no mother or father.
Right. Or if the birth certificate has information
Right.
that's not accurate.
Right.
And do you have a question, or is this just a plea from the heart?
This is a plea from the heart, but also, you know, how do we deal, because we have situations where we're dealing with family members
Yes.
that are fighting this tooth and nail, and they think we're so wrong, and because we stand for marriage between a man and a woman, they've been hurt. They've been hurt in their life, and they're going the other way.
Right, right. I think dealing with family members is probably the most difficult aspect of this whole thing. You know, I'm an academic by training, and so, you know, I tend to focus on all the logical things and so on and so forth. And I'm really convinced that we have the best logical arguments, you know. Been in multiple situations where, you know, the kind of points that I make, nobody really refutes. They don't even attempt to refute. They come back with the emotional things. But these personal points actually are very important because, as you correctly said, people have been hurt, people have been wounded. And so I think it's very important that people know that they are loved, but you don't agree with them. And that as far as you're concerned, they're not kicked out of the family. If they want to remove themselves from the family, you can't stop them from doing that. But as far as you're concerned, they're still your beloved nephew or son or daughter, whatever it might be. I think that's the best approach. And you know, you're not going to win those. That's the sad thing. And if I could just, you know, as I mentioned, I try to always put this in the larger context of the whole sexual revolution. I think this, what you're pointing to, has been a problem since the very beginning of the sexual revolution. I mean, because I remember very clearly back in the 60s and early 70s when, you know, family members started coming home with out-of-wedlock childbearing, and, you know, always this wonderful mom, let's have a baby shower. And, you know, it was heartbreaking, and it was, and we were being put in a position where we had to go along for the sake of the family. But really and truly, it was the other person with their, you know, with their demand for acceptance, right? That was kind of putting people in this, putting people over a barrel emotionally, in a sense. And so it really is difficult. And as I look back on it, it's been part of the thing from the very beginning of people not knowing what to say, and so gradually giving up the position that you know, it really would have been better if you had married the girl. You know, really would have. And events prove it, right? I mean, that's almost always the case, that events prove that the old way would have been better.
My heart goes out to the child that goes into the classroom.
Absolutely.
That when asked, you know, what does your daddy do? Well, I don't have a daddy.
Right.
I have two mommies.
Or
I don't have a mother because I have two dads.
Or I don't have a dad because my mom is not married and has never been married. You know, all of those situations, the teachers really do have a lot to deal with. I mean, we all have a lot to deal with. But that's not a reason why we're wrong, right? I mean, I you know, and that's kind of a sad thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and for this. This is great. I just have a quick comment and one quick question after.
Okay.
Comment is, 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, I worked with a few people, and we called a bunch of these state representatives to see where they stand on the issue, because there were some that nobody knew where they stood one way or another. I was terrified, because I hate making phone calls like this, but I've done it before. I was very surprised. I called over 20 representatives, and a few of them didn't call me back, but usually they even called me back. And when I talked to them, they were open. They were undecided, most of these folks. And I just had a few talking points like, this contributes to confusion about marriage, and it causes family breakdown, and that increases welfare spending. And they all said, almost every one of them said, yeah, you're right. I'm getting so much pressure from the other side. And there were, out of 20, there might have been 3 or 4 who didn't agree, but even they were polite. I thought I was going to get nasty response. So anyway, that's my experience. I want to encourage other people, don't be afraid to talk to your reps and reason with them, because they don't like to be told how to vote, but be asked to please consider it and think about the issues. And if you have a good argument like that, a few talking points, they will listen.
Do you know, I had a radio show this afternoon. I don't know who this was. Maybe you know who it was. I just answered the phone and did these radio shows. But the radio show host sounded a lot like that. It was like he was looking for a reason to agree.
Yeah.
But and so a lot.
They have not heard our side.
But even if they have, they're responding to the pressure, and they need to feel that we're confident. You know, and that we're not foaming at the mouth or something, you know, that we have something to say and that it's sensible, and that we're going to stand by it, you know, and that we can't be talked out of it or whatever. So anyway, go ahead with your question.
My question is, can you give us a few points of what worked well in the California Proposition 8 effort, and can you point to any books or magazine articles about the success story?
That's a good question.
We really don't know that much about it.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I can tell you what our talking points were in California, but I'm not sure that would help. I mean, I will tell you what they were.
Organizational things.
Yeah. One thing people don't know about Prop 8 is that it was literally the biggest grassroots campaign in history. I mean, it's literally the biggest grassroots campaign in history. You would think proponents of democracy and citizen participation and so on would just be going gaga over this, you know. We had 100,000 volunteers, which is unheard of to have that many volunteers. We had 70,000 individual contributors. When we went to file our paperwork with the Secretary of State, we crashed the computer. You know, I mean, so it was really quite an outpouring of citizen support. And I think a lot of it had to do with the various churches getting involved and talking to their members in a serious way about their participation. There was active participation, boots on the ground type participation from members of the LDS Church. They were fabulous. The young adult singles in the Mormon Church in the LA area were given the job of taking care of the get out the vote calls. And young adult singles in their way, you know, a lot of groups, I guess, have these kind of demographic groups, right? And so these are young people who have finished college but aren't yet married. And so they figured, you know, you guys have the time and the skills, you don't have the responsibility to small children, we want you to manage, we want you to work on get out the vote calls. Those kids, I shouldn't call them kids, but, you know, compared to me, they're kids. They organized over 1 million get out the vote phone calls. I mean, just think about that. There's a gang of kids in LA that, you know, were the ringleaders of all these other volunteers all over the state, you know, to do get out the vote phone calls. And I would say the key thing that I learned from watching them is you've got to make it fun. It's got to be fun. You've got to have a party. Everybody comes to your house with your cell phone chargers, you got pizza, you know, you're going to hang out. Everybody's going to make their calls until their phone goes dead. Then you put it on charge, you get to have a break, you know, and you make a party out of it. You make fun out of it. It's got to be fun. You know, I'm very big on fun. Ruth Institute is officially in favor of fun because it needs to be fun to be on our side, right? I mean, people think it's all doom and gloom and all that kind of stuff, but you know, it's not. We can't allow that. So that's the one, you know, sort of overall lesson that I would say. That's one. The other lesson that I would say is it's very important that you work with people you're not used to working with. It's very important that you get out of your comfort zone, whatever that might be, whether it's ethnically or religiously or, you know, whatever it might be, that you know, just put yourself out there with other people who care about this issue and, you know, let it be enough that they care about the marriage issue, you know, and that they love the Lord. I remember this one time I was at Jim Garlow's church, and he's a big mega church guy, you know, and he did wonderful, amazing work, you know, organizing everybody. And at the end of the thing, he brought in this guy, another Pentecostal guy, as it happens. He said, okay, we're all going to pray together. So I'm thinking, great, I'm a Roman Catholic, you know, we're going to pray together. We're going to say the Lord's Prayer. Everybody knows that. That's what's going to happen. You know, so I'm sitting there, you know, I'm all ready, and I'm looking around. You know, the Pentecostals are not just saying the Lord's Prayer. You know, they're all, so I'm like, you know, and they're all, you know, the whole thing, Our Father, you know? But, so, okay, I was a little uncomfortable, but who cares? You know, who cares? You have to let it be okay. And I think our Lord wants us to have that be okay. So I think that's really important. Yes, ma'am.
In giving legal status to these homosexual relationships, that's my term. You talked about the state making important decisions about who the parent is, and creating sort of definitions for what a parent is, other than natural parenthood. Would you say that also that will become a well-trodden path that further threatens parental rights with regard to, say, matters like education, religion, health, medical treatment, so that then the state begins to assume a greater and greater role in the family life? Do you think this opens the door for that?
Well, I think the door's already open in some respects, but do I think it widens it a little bit? Yeah, I do. I really do. Some of these cases, these custody cases that I've told you about, if you really think about what is going on in these cases, you see the case itself is an assault on parental rights. Because there are a number of these cases that have the same structure that I mentioned, where the mother decides she doesn't want to be in the relationship with her former girlfriend anymore, and she wants her and her child to go away and not have to see them anymore. Well, the sensible, I think, correct ruling would be, okay, who is the child's mother? Who is the child's father? This woman gave birth to the child. Here's another person over here who is not biologically related to the child and who did not do an adoption. Okay, I mean, if you really want to share parenting, you can do an adoption, right? So this is a person who's not related either by birth or by adoption. Let us call her a non-parent. Okay, so what is at stake is the state going to give parental rights to non-parents? Okay, that's what's at stake. And the whole gay and lesbian legal establishment is saying, yeah, they should. That is exactly what ought to happen. If they intended to be parents, that should be enough. So you're right as a parent to say, I want my child to associate with this person and not with the other person. That's kaput, right? And that is part of what's at stake in those cases. And then the other things that you're talking about, the state has already insinuated itself into a lot of those things, but it's opening the door even further, I think. So I think we should be concerned. Whose kids are they, after all? There is a natural right of the parent to their own child. And I think that is part of what's at stake here, for sure. Yes, sir.
In regard to that point that was just made, how does this intentional parenting differ from adoption? And are the people who argue in favor of homosexual marriage or homosexual adoption or homosexual parenting, are they arguing that there should be some sort of automatic adoption by the intentional birth parents?
Yes, it's the latter. Okay, so you've asked a couple of different questions here, so let me take them up because they're all important questions, and you need to think these things through a little bit before somebody flings them at you. Okay, so on the last point that you brought up, I believe that is their intention, yes, that if you are in a civil union with somebody, in fact, the story I read here about the lady who lost her child and went into hiding, and that's actually a real story that's based on something that happened in Vermont, the Miller-Jenkins case, which probably some of you have heard about that. The presumption there is that simply by being in the union, in the civil union under Vermont law, that when she gave birth to that baby, the other woman was presumed to be the child's parent as if they had gone through the whole process of an adoption and so on. So without doing the step of being really sure that this is what we really mean, yes, I'm going to be an adoptive parent and she's going to be an adoptive parent, and legally there's going to be no difference between the two of us, even though I gave birth to the baby, let's be real sure this is what we want to do. No, that's not what happened. They want it to be all one step so that it will be equal and the same as what happens in a heterosexual couple, you see. So another way to look at this whole thing is that the wish of the gay activists is that the couples should be treated as identical. But in fact, all of the relationships that depend on marriage will be less equal than they were before. They're introducing new forms of inequality, new forms of injustice into the relationships that depend on marriage, such as motherhood in this case, right? So there's, this mother, Lisa Jenkins, is treated, it's Janet Jenkins. Lisa Miller has fewer rights than other mothers because she was in a Vermont civil union. So that's how I would answer that part of it. As to adoption, there is, I think, something important to say about adoption. Sometimes people say to me, well, why are you so hung up about biology? Have you forgotten about adoption? Well, no, actually, I haven't forgotten about adoption because I'm an adoptive mother and I was a foster parent, you know. So no, it wouldn't escape my mind, right, that there is such a thing. But the point about adoption is that adoption is an exceptional situation. It exists, it's a legal institution that is child-centered. Adoption exists to give children the parents they need. It does not exist to give adults the kids that they want. That's the key difference, okay? And what's going on here is a demand that we're entitled to kids, and so therefore we have the right to something, this or that or the other thing. But adoption is based on the premise that it's there to help children who need parents. It's only incidentally helpful to adults, right? And it's a child-centered institution in that sense, not an adult-centered institution, and it doesn't undermine the basic structure of biological parenthood. In other words, you're trying to do as much as you can to mimic biological parenthood when you're doing adoption. You have to terminate the rights of the birth parents. You don't end up with 3 parents or 4 parents or something. Legally, the birth parents are no longer parents. And you do all of that before you give the child to adoptive parents. See? And the other thing about adoption is that every step of the process just screams that biology matters. See, if you think about it, women don't put their babies up for adoption without a good reason. They don't just say, oh well, adopted kids do fine, oh well, I'm sure the adoptive parents will love them, oh just give up the baby. No, it's very, you know, it's very hard to sever that time. The state doesn't just plop kids into families without checking them out a little bit, you know. And adopted children want to know something about their origins a lot of the time. So the adoption process actually helps us to see how important biology actually is, but it's a very humane institution that exists to deal with exceptional situations without undermining the general rule. And that's why it's really, really different from same-sex parenting. In spite of the sort of superficial appearances, it actually is quite different.
Crop TV.